So we hear the singing in the family?
Well, as my mother was a lyricist, and I've just telling Dr. Quraishi that a few of her songs, bhajans, were even sung by Lata Mangeshkar and Muhammad Rafi. And I still remember that we used to play them on the gramophones and the LP records that players those days. So maybe, and my eldest sister also was a singer. So maybe it was in the family. But I, of course, I never knew that I could sing, and I don't think I can sing. Even today I feel so. But Dr. Quraishi is also from St. Stephen's College, and happens to be, he was I think 1 or 2 years senior to me. And the first time I discovered perhaps that I could sing was that when our seniors, St. Stephen's College at those days, between 65 and 69, the ragging used to be terrible, just terrible, not terrible, just terrible. And every fresher had to find some way of escaping ragging. So one fresher said that, can you act? I said, no, I can't act. They said, can you make a public speech? I said, no. And then, with the usual abuse, he said that, how can you not be a public speaker when your father is the prime minister? He had just become the prime minister. He said, then what can you do? Can you sing? I said, I'll try. And I sang and became so popular that I escaped ragging. Every fresh senior wanted to rag me by getting me to sing. And I do not remember if Dr. Quraishi ever ragged me, I don't remember. But then there were other seniors who at that time. But yes, of course, I would say not overtly, but covertly, he did rag me when I fought the election. He was the chief election commissioner. And because, when I was fighting the elections, the various those controls and restrictions that they were there, it is almost impossible to fight an election for an honest man today. And I have no regret, but one must remember that if one decides to get into politics, there is a compromise. One has to compromise. The day you enter into politics, and Sunilji also would agree, that you compromise, because the laws of the land have got to change. The laws of the land do not permit you to remain honest. With all those restrictions from the Election Commission, there is a limit of the expenses that you can incur to fight an election. But I can tell you, out of 545 MPs that we have, I don't think none of them writes the correct figure that he has spent, because it is impossible to fight an election within the limit prescribed by the Chief Election Commissioner.
Well, shall we applaud Sir for his integrity? And come again, sir? Can we also give a big cheer to the Chief Election Commissioner, Dr. Quraishi? What is your favorite song that we would love to hear you singing? Your brother vouches for you. Now,
yeah, before I say, I'd just like to talk about, because this entire program is focused on JAI JAWAN JAI KISAN and is dedicated to the memory of Lal Bahadur Shastri. I would just like to give the background, because everybody talked about JAI JAWAN JAI KISAN, and we all know that it is as relevant today as it was 50 years ago, and it still resonates across the length and breadth of our nation. And the background, because, to me, after that time, I was 16 or 17, as I said, I'm in school, and then I got into college. And as one of our guests said that, we used to go to college after 10th. I think it was 11th. It used to be Shane, Cambridge. And our youngsters today, they study to graduate, it takes 15 years. But for us, it took 14 years, 11 plus 3. And so I was in college. Sunil also was in school at that time. And it symbolizes for me and for the family self-reliance. And it was during the wartime that America, the American president at that time, threatened Lal Bahadur Shastri and warned him that if he did not stop war, America will stop giving wheat under PL 480. And I remember, though I was a child, that he sent for Mr. Swaminathan, who was a young agricultural scientist at that time. He said, Mr. Swaminathan ji, please, he was very, very humble, as another guest said about the humility part. And he sent for him, said, Swaminathan ji, tell me that for how many days do the Indians have to fast that we don't need to import wheat from America? And he gave back after some time and said, a few hours, and said that no question of days, Mr. Sir, it's a question of just one meal. If the Indians don't eat wheat once in a week, there won't be any need to import wheat from America. And that is why he gave the slogan. So it symbolizes self-reliance. And similarly, the Kisan part, the Kisan also, because he believed that if India had to protect its territorial integrity and the security of the nation, the soldiers have got to feel elated, they have got to be motivated. So I just wanted to give this background. That is because it happened you all have heard in the newspapers, you read in the newspaper, heard about it, you have seen on films like this. But it happened in our family, Sunil, myself, my other brothers, and he came home, he said that I'm going to give a call. Can all of you remain hungry? We had said we had no problem, and then he gave the call. So this is the background of this famous slogan, JAI JAWAN JAI KISAN, which symbolizes self-design. Because one thing is very clear, Lal Bahadur Shastri believed, and I think all of us believe so, that India can, and the people of this country, the 1.23 billion people of this country, can compromise with anything, but never with the self-respect of the nation. They will never compromise with the self-respect of the nation. When tsunami happened, there were a lot of aids coming from all over the world. India refused all aid because the self-respect. If India remains in this form that India is today, is because it has always aimed to be self-reliant and has never wanted to depend on somebody's help and aid.
Wonderful, inspiring. Thank you, sir. I was not there 50 years ago, but you're taking me back to those times. You're taking the youngsters back to those times, and I'm sure it'll have a great impact as we live our lives in the future. Today, when we look back at his life, at Lal Bahadur Shastriji's life, and as I delve on the qualities of this great man, as I've been interacting with the family, I've had the privilege of interacting with the family, I am touched. I'm deeply touched. And you as a son, over the years when you've spent time with him while he was alive, what were those qualities that you've observed that has touched you personally and that you've tried hard to imbibe in your life? If you could just share it with the next generation and to encourage them to live their life.
Of course, there were very many qualities that Lal Bahadur Shastri had. And I said that I spent the first 17 years of my life with him. But I think three qualities of his which have greatly impacted me, and I still remember them. One, of course, is his personal integrity and intellectual honesty. It's not just personal integrity, but his intellectual honesty. Even his political adversaries would come to take his advice, and then he would say that, you are my political adversary, why do you come and take advice from me? And then his political adversary would say that I come to take advice because I know that you have such great intellectual honesty that if you would advise me, you will give me the correct advice, despite the fact that I consider you as my political adversary. So his personal integrity and his intellectual honesty. And I do remember that when he became the Prime Minister, I was, as I said, only 17 years old. But on the quiet, I had learned driving. And it so happened that, in those days, Akbar Road, there was hardly any traffic. And I would quietly in the afternoon, with the help of Sunil and my other brother, and they would motivate me that you are the eldest, you must be the first to learn driving. And three of us will quietly take out the car and drive down Akbar Road and practice. And finally, I did learn driving. I told, when he became the Prime Minister, one of his secretaries, Mr. Kailash Narayan, I said that I want to have a license. Though I was not 18, I knew that, because you need to be 18 to get a license, driving license in India. And his secretary said, okay, and by evening I got the driving license, though I was not eligible to own a driving license and to drive. And I was very proud of the fact that I owned a driving license. And I waited for my father, Lal Bahadur Shastri, to return from office. As I said, he was the Prime Minister. And when he came back, I showed him proudly the driving license. He said, how can you own a driving license? You are not 18 as yet. I said, but I'm the Prime Minister's son. And the moment he heard this, I said, I don't find you to be very happy. He said, I'm sad, I'm very hurt. I said, why so? And he said, the law of the land has been violated within the precincts of the Prime Minister's house. And that is why I'm hurt. That it is violated day in and day out, but then it is violated today within the precincts of the Prime Minister's house, where we make laws of the land to be followed and not to violate them. So this was his integrity. This was his personal integrity. And now, of course, you relate it to today's situation, and that's why we're having this kind of a program, to inculcate into the youth the honesty, the integrity, intellectual honesty, and all those good things that our great leaders and other individuals have taught us. And it is, in fact, you know, when he talked of this, the violation of the land, today it is, I mean, you relate it, as I said, to today's situation. Day in and day out, the laws of the land are violated within the precincts of all those bungalows in Luton's Delhi. And the Luton's Delhi makes laws for the land to be followed and not to be violated. That is the lesson that the people in public life have got to remember if India has to be made what they believed in and what they had envisaged. And I think this youth today, they want the India of what we are talking about. So that was his integrity, number one. And number two, I always found in him to be taking, he was a very high risk, he had very high risk-taking ability. Very high risk-taking ability. And he could take risks. And I remember, because when I was seeing the war, that again a wave of nostalgia flashed across my mind. And I went back into 1965. And I remember that conversation, that, you know, when he ordered the armed forces to cross the international border and march towards Lahore, and asked the Indian Air Force to go into action to dispel the Pakistani attack. And at that time, I told him, I said, haven't you taken a big risk? He said, what do you mean big risk? I said that big risk because you may lose the war, and that what happens? He said, Bete, great battles are won only if you have the will to fight. Only if you have the will to fight, that great battles can be won. And you can see this, it is taught in history books. All those great battles have been won who had the will to fight. From Pandavas to Ashoka and thereon. So it is this. This was the second quality that has impacted me. And of course, his third quality was his humility. And one of our lady guests mentioned about the humility. Others also mentioned about humility. Humility is so closely identified with Lal Bahadur Shastri. And let me tell you, it's not only Lal Bahadur Shastri. By and large, I think, if not all, at least 70%, the Indian psyche is such, the Indian people are such. That is the greatness of Indian people, that the majority of the Indian people today are still, they are humble, they are modest. Majority of them are humble and modest. It's only a small group, you know, who are aggressive, arrogant, and they don't know what to say. So the third quality that I remember is that, you know, he was very, very humble. I remember the words. We have a group captain here from the Air Force today, and it is for his benefit that in the audience, of course, and Marshal of the Air Force now, Arjun Singh, who was the chief of the air staff. I was listening to his, once talking to him, I was also listening to his to his interview on television one day, and he said that Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri would come up to the gate, door of the house, and sometimes even up to the car to see him off. And this is the humility that Shastriji had, and I wish and I do hope and I urge the younger generation that please do not lose sight of this humbleness, humility, modesty, which is a part of our culture, and it is a part of the psyche of the majority of the Indian people. Thank you very much.
So come, join us in this nation-building project. Together we can contribute to our community and our nation. Let us begin by singing our national anthem, Jan Gan Man, with passion, pride and precision, that is in around 52 seconds, thereby honoring and respecting our nation's institutions as laid out in the Constitution of India.